the business model is, okay, there's work involved, but it's very simple when you break it down compared to a traditional bricks and mortar business. And I think, like you said, I hope one of the big take home points that your listeners got today, and it sounds like you've got it as well, is that there's way more value in a lot of websites that you see out there than you could ever even begin to imagine. People so often think they're just an online presence, but they don't realize there's massive asset value sitting there with these online businesses.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hennche. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hennche. Today we're delving into something different, website investing. It might sound new to some, but we've got Matt Red here to guide us. Matt is a successful entrepreneur, mentor, and expert in website investment. He specializes in buying and renovating websites. Yes, websites, not real estate, for profit. This is unlike other assets we've spoken about so far on the path to wealth. Well, Matt, thank you so much for making the time. Welcome to the path to wealth.
Thanks for having me on, Hannah. It's great to be here.
So tell us, real estate investors, a little bit more what it means to build cash flow through websites, which is something that we're very unfamiliar with, something that we probably can't quite wrap our head around, but that's why you're here to help us.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, so my wife and I have done things quite differently in our careers. We're entrepreneurs. We buy and sell businesses. Been doing it for 30 odd years. And what happened was in the GFC, around 2008, it was actually before then, but we discovered the online space and we could buy and sell online businesses the same way we used to buy bricks and mortar businesses. And so what's really cool about how we do that is that it's quite passive. These are businesses where they're online and we don't have to be working on them every day. So there's work that needs to be done on them, but really importantly and of high interest to most real estate investors that we speak to, the cash flows, Hannah's, amazing compared to traditional real estate investments or investing in shares. And what we do is basically, like any of your listeners who've done real estate, it's virtually the same process. We just follow the same 3-step process. We buy, we renovate, and then we sell later on, or we hold for the cash flow. So in essence, we are renovating virtual real estate, and that's what we got really good at. And then people now ask us, like yourself, come and chat to our audience about what are you doing there and the sorts of returns you're getting. And so literally we are buying, like rundown, the equivalent of the worst house in the best street type idea, and we fix them up with simple renovations, not major renovation. We're trying to buy quite simple websites and then we just hold them in our portfolio and we just build up a portfolio over time. And then we run with the winners that go really strong. And that's in essence what we do. Been doing that now for since 2008, so nearly 15 years.
So you compared it to like the worst house in the best neighborhood. Does the neighborhood have something to do with, for example, .com or .au, or like there's tons of people who swear by .com.
Yeah.
But then I also see like for example, Meta has meta.ai.
Yeah, that's a really good question. When we talk, it's often what is the virtual neighborhood. There's kind of a few things there. And you're right, the extension of the domain name, but in essence, it's the domain name. But in particular, it's the niche. So we might find we like to buy websites where people are looking for information or advice, or so like hobby sites if they want to learn how to play golf better or lose weight or learn how to play guitar or photography or anything where we can help people with answers to questions. And then what we do is we put advertising or affiliate offers in front of them. We don't do any e-commerce. So most people think when they hear us speak, about buying and selling websites, it's all about e-commerce, but we deliberately don't touch that because of our background. We used to own and buy and sell wholesale import businesses, and that's really tough when you're a young entrepreneur or your money's tied up in physical inventory. So the sorts of sites we're buying have no physical inventory whatsoever. They just have a web presence. And so really the domain name becomes like the street address, and then the website that sits on it is like the house. Is it a 1-story, 2-story, duplex, or is it, what sort of a premises is it? So the actual website that sits on there, I guess you could say there's 2 parts to a website: is the domain name, which is literally like your street address, and then the asset itself, which is the house that's sitting on there, which is the website, and that's the bit that we renovate. So we buy both. We buy the street address and the house that's with it, and and we just fix up the house that's on there, like the website. And there can be value, quite a bit of value in the domain name as well. So that virtual street address, coming back to your original question, can have a lot of value too, depending on the age of it as well. And like I said, the niche that it's in. And as you said, .coms are typically the most valuable. They're the ones we really like to get. And Hannes, what's really cool is, just like with real estate, you think how many houses are on the planet. Well, it's the same now with websites. You think how many websites are out there. And so there's a lot of opportunity to find rundown websites. When you know what you're doing, this is when it gets really interesting for our members, is once you've got that knowledge to find those rundown online assets, there's a lot of opportunity. We're finding neglected websites, sites that people have just left, and we refresh them and get them making money again.
So I just kind of like quickly run a stat here. There is 400 million active websites out there.
Yeah. Yep. So it's
and another 1.6 billion dormant.
Yeah. So I think the latest stat for 24, isn't it? It's up around 2 or 3 billion websites. Yeah. And about, they reckon, what is it? What's the number that they're saying is active? About
400 million.
400 million.
That number is from SEO.ai.
Yeah. So that's a lot of opportunities to find. And we buy the dormant ones as well and refresh them because they've got age. So
what does it mean to have age? Is that part of the SEO dominance that helps because they're aged, they're in the algorithm, they get picked up differently?
Yep. Yeah. So certain domain names have value because of, might be how they sound or the words they're in. So, I mean, that's a whole art in itself, is in valuing domain names. But yes, we're looking for SEO value typically, and that's probably an advanced kind of idea for listeners if they haven't ever been online before. But that is one of the things. Once you get more skilled at this, that is definitely something we love to look for, SEO value of these. But Hannes, it's not just the domain name though, it's also the website itself. We're looking for intrinsic value sitting there. So it's just like you real estate investors, when you see, okay, you can see the block of land and you can see the house that's sitting on it. If it's neglected or not been optimized, a potential developer might look and go, well, that's a block that I can, subdivide and add, 3 apartments onto or whatever. We're doing the same kind of thing. We're looking at these websites and going, what can we do with that over the next couple of years?
Interesting. So let's say, for example, a niche that I know that I've read about this once. There was a guy who had a website. It was his hobby to brew beer. He started kind of blogging about it.
Yep.
And I know he also monetized it in a similar fashion.
Yep.
So those are the kind of niches that you're looking for. Something where somebody might have even come out of their own passion. There's a hobby, there's an intrinsic value. They're adding over it, maybe even for multiple years. Eventually they might carry the way of life, maybe they're doing something different, but the website and the presence kind of stands, and then you're approaching that individual like, hey, would you be willing to give up on that? We kind of take it into our portfolio and we kind of revive it.
Yep. That is perfect. That's the golden situation. That's exactly our strategy. And, did you say root beer? Someone's blogging about making root beer or whatever.
There was a home brewer.
Yeah.
That I read about.
It's actually a really good niche.
Started.
It's a very smart example, Hannes. It's a really, really good niche because people are looking for information around it. And the scenario you just outlined is exactly what happens. People get passionate. They set up these websites. They blog about their experiences in making home brewed beer. And then if they don't know what they're doing because they're just passion bloggers, typically after, 3 to 5 years, they don't make much money out of it. So they give up. So then we come along and buy
It
it.
might even cost them money.
Pardon?
Might even cost them money to run the whole thing because
That's right. Yeah. In terms of the content and effort. And that's what happens. People just go, we come along and say, well, we'll give you cash for that site. And it's got a lot of assets because it's real content in this day and age of AI content that's highly valuable. But more importantly, it's got age and it's probably got existing traffic coming to it. It's probably got a good domain name. And then what we do is when you know how to monetize websites straight away, like on a home brewing site, we've got clients that own those that make really good money off them. You find affiliate offers for, maybe home brewing equipment, and you can send people over to Amazon and get an affiliate commission if they buy, home brewing equipment, or there will be direct affiliate offers with home brewing equipment because it's such a good niche. Also, you could potentially put ads on there or get sponsored ads on there if it's a really big website, depending on how big it is.
Okay, now in order to kind of categorize that, what is a big website? What is little or a lot of traffic? Can you kind of refine those benchmarks? Like, are we talking thousands of visitors a month or millions of visitors a month?
Well, so in terms of measuring the size of site, obviously there's maybe the dollar value that it makes, but it's more, I think, in these sorts of instances when you're looking at these rundown or age sites, it's more you want to look at the traffic, how much traffic comes to it. And typically 50,000 plus a month visitors would be considered a reasonable site, like getting towards being a bigger website. Now, we've got to be there's no such thing as black and white with online business, Hannah's, because it depends on the niche. So if it's in the finance niche or say motor cars, that's too small. Whereas
you need a lot more traffic.
Yeah, you need a lot
Finance
more traffic. So it's very niche dependent. So when you get into this is why we like teaching beginners. So we're really good at teaching beginners how to do this. And if you're listening to this, if you're kind of interested, what you want to do is go into niches where they're kind of micro niches or very like home brewing. It's a perfect example. It's not a massive big mainstream thing. So you don't need as much traffic to make money. We've got what we've noticed across our community is with micro niche style websites, you can start making money off them when they've even just got 5,000 visitors a month. You don't need a lot of traffic because the leads can be worth so much money.
With the home brewing, I understand.
Yep.
But aren't there like other topics like knitting or something where that doesn't translate? Like home brewing kits are probably $300-$400.
Yep.
Maybe people are willing to pay $25 to $50 for an affiliate lead.
Yep. So I'll give you a really good example on exactly that niche. You mentioned knitting niche, right? So we have a young couple who they do the laptop lifestyle thing, and they do this full time. And Nathan and Alexa, a number of years ago, they bought a knitting and crochet website. So Nathan is male. He's an electrician. He knows nothing about the niche. They bought it for $4,000, and because it had a lot of traffic. I think it gets it's 50,000 plus a month on that site. They fixed it up and they have a team of writers. Obviously not them. They know nothing about knitting. So they just hire knitting writers who can write articles around knitting, and they make money off affiliate offers on that website.
How does this work? Am I hiring my mom who knows how to knit?
No, there's heaps of you go to Upwork. There's heaps of places online where you can hire expert writers. You can go to Fiverr, Upwork. Yeah, good question. No, you're not hiring your mum. No, you're hiring professional writers, and they're not that expensive. But Hannah's, that site makes them $4,000 a month now net. So it only costs $4,000. That's US.
So how much should they spend to run it? So the basic cost to run the website is not that much, but how much does it cost to have quality writing? And then I understand that I can hire a professional writer. I wasn't aware that I can hire a professional writer on Upwork that also knows something about knitting.
Oh, it's easy.
But I guess
so much, especially since COVID, but even be 15 years ago, we were hiring writers in any niche you can think of. World's a big place. You go to Upwork, and what you've got to look at, so content costs money, but I'm talking in net figures. So these guys, even after all their content costs, they're still making $4,000 a month off that website.
Yeah, I got that part. I just try to, if I were to hire, for example, that I'm part of the private chef world to some degree, and I'm educating chefs. So now I'm wondering, how can somebody build out that website, basically?
Yeah.
And would that mean that instead of just using my own blog content, which I've been using so far, maybe I should start hiring other chefs
Oh,
to write
yeah.
blog content.
So I was going to mention in your niche, right? The food
Yeah,
blog.
because this website and in that podcast niche, there's actually no one else doing this other than me.
Oh, wow. Well done. So you
Like,
can.
and this,
So for someone like
Yeah.
you, see in the food, can I just mention the food blog niche? This is a really interesting one. You'll find this interesting.
no, this is different. Food blog is tons and tons. That's
Yeah.
like, they're like a dime a dozen. You will find them at any corner of the internet.
Yeah.
But the private chef world serving the 1% of the 1%,
Gotcha.
that's an absolute niche. And
Beautiful.
what we're doing also the podcast, for example, there's not a second podcast in the world that is talking about private service on the highest level, working for billionaires
Awesome.
and celebrities.
Yep.
That's kind of just, I'm trying to understand how that would tie into that.
So now we're getting into a real micro niche. So to find people that can write articles for food blogs, that's easy. There's multiple stories in our community, and with all the website brokers we know, where food blogs are selling for millions of dollars now, which I honestly didn't think I would see, because there's so many food blogs out there. I didn't think food blogs would be worth as much as what they are now. And if you're listening to this and you've got a food blog and you've got a big following, it's probably worth way more money than you realize. Turns out food blogs are incredibly popular amongst big buyers. They roll them up. They build these media companies. They might own multiple.
Oh, that's what we see in the States now. Every other car wash, every other dentist is being rolled up right now into, and then the multiple amplifiers, and then they might sell it off again.
And that's exactly what's happening in a lot of niches. So in the last few years, private equity's moved in a big way, particularly in the food blog space, because they realize how valuable those are, because they get big followings, and that's what they're buying, and they roll them up. But going back to your awesome question, your awesome niche, like going into how to be a high-end chef for billionaires and things, that is so micro niche. So if you wanted to create more content there, the easiest way is what you're doing, which is doing lots of interviews with experts. Because it's so niche, you don't need to. So what do you want to offer as information? Like, what's the purpose? Do you want to help people become chefs for?
So for me, initially, it was really about, see, when I came to the States, I earned minimum wage in New York.
Yep.
And I had no money, and I was an immigrant who was willing to work hard. And I worked at one of the best restaurants in the world, the restaurant Danielle.
Awesome.
It's a 3 Michelin star restaurant.
Yep.
And I was wondering, like, why am I working 60 to 70 hours a week and I'm barely scrapping by in New York? So I started building a money mindset. I'm like, okay, I need to have higher leverage opportunities. That's when we started building businesses ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also realized there is another path, which is working in the private service for billionaires, because if you solve rich people's problems, they will pay you based on their rates.
Yep.
And kind of just learning through this, I wanted to turn around and teach my younger self. I'm like, the next guy doesn't need to spend a decade on figuring this stuff out.
Yep.
I can just turn around. I'm like, hey, like, here is where I started. You don't need to spend 10 years on this. This is where you can build leverage. This is how you can price yourself. And basically, I'm interviewing experts left and right.
Perfect.
Trying to extract the best knowledge on how to go about it and put that all out there.
Yep.
That's how I've been doing it so far.
That's a perfect online business model. That's something we recommend to people every day, because it's very niche, and it's easy to target your target audience with it, and it's easy to provide content that can help those people because you're passionate about it. So in terms of creating content, in that instance, it's ideal if it's you that does it and does interviews like you are. You just transcribe them, turn them into articles that are useful for people, give useful advice. And if it goes really big, Hannes, you can probably hire other experts that can write elements of the knowledge that you need to provide to your audience down the track. You would be surprised. We have clients that they hire lawyers off Upwork, they'll hire ex-journalists. There's a big talent pool sitting there on those platforms for writers. And you've got to remember what a lot of writers do as well. Say in the instance of your awesome micro niche, some of the articles that you could get written that you shouldn't be writing yourself are ones where they need deep research. And that's where these outsourced writers are brilliant at. That's what they do for a living. They're really good at researching and then turning them into very readable and useful articles. And it doesn't matter what topic on the planet you think of, they can do it. And that's how a lot of high quality content is created, by hiring good writers. So typically a journo, that journalist can do that really well, and you can hire them pretty easily. And most articles these days, we just ran a webinar on it yesterday with our advanced students, and we were asking them, what are you all paying for good articles? And the prices range from $30 US up to about $100 US per article. And that's valuable assets. That is hugely valuable. So that gives you a concept of how much those articles are worth.
This is so interesting. So what makes a great piece of content? Is it about what drives traffic? Is this like, where do we get clicks and eyes? Is it where do we thrive more of the affiliate links? What kind of content are you trying to teach?
Yeah, that's a really smart question. It's all of the above, actually. But at the end of the day, in this day and age, particularly with AI-driven content, anyone can use AI to create content. We don't recommend that, by the way, because it's particularly in niches like yours, people want real experience. And so there's the concept that Google have told us they want in terms of content, and that is helpful content. It's got to be helpful to that niche. So someone coming to the website, what we spend a lot of time on and what we enjoy the most in terms of renovating websites is what we call keyword research, understanding. So no matter what niche I go into, say I bought a site in your niche, or say I bought a site like Nathan and Alexa did in the knitting niche, you've got to do a bunch of keyword research to figure out what are people looking up in this niche. And there's lots of tools out there that can do it, but there's a free tool called Google, and they've got their ad planner as well, but there's heaps of tools. And essentially what we're doing, this is where you bring a bit of smart/common sense to this game of renovating websites, is figuring out exactly what you just asked. What the people who are interested in becoming high-end chefs and making serious money out of it, what do they need to know? What do they want to know? What are they interested in? And what are they going to sit and read? What's helpful to them? And Google outright, there's Google documentation on the Google Webmaster Guidelines and SEO guidelines that lays out what constitutes high quality content. And they have this concept called EAT score, which is experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And basically, in this day and age, that's what search engine optimization is built around. And the cool thing is, you can learn. Now, we're getting into some pretty advanced concepts here, Hannes, but this is at the high level. This is what you're trying to ultimately get on your website. And if you look at any high-ranking website in the world today, you will see when you break it down, they have all those four qualities. They have experience of some kind. Say in, like yourself, you've got bags of experience. You've got expertise. So you've been doing it. You know what you're talking about. You're an authority because you're running a podcast. Google can easily see that you're out there, teaching this, talking to people, and you're trustworthy because you've been doing it for years and you've got a position. It might be linked to on your LinkedIn profile. There's all these kind of micro signals that Google looks at. But so do humans. Humans are checking out as well. So humans aren't going to just follow some random website that says, hey, become a chef for a billionaire and make lots of money. It's got to have all those four elements in place. So what's really cool these days with Google is they tell us outright what they want. Now, there is a disconnect. The devil's in the detail, and this is where you need experience. And what we teach people, like if you're listening to this, you always start out small. Or start with a hobby site like you have, something that you're passionate with. And we recommend people, if they want to get into this game, is just buy a simple little website for under $5,000 just to learn off. So you're not risking a lot of money. It's not like buying a six-figure business or anything like that. You just practice on a little tiny site to learn these concepts and to get to understand how to do that keyword research to pull in, like what you're saying, what is good quality content? What should we be providing? Because it is twofold. There is also the commercial reality of we want content that brings people to the website who are going to pay for something. There is that side as well.
So what tools do you like to track the traffic? Like you need to get a pretty good understanding, like where people stopping at my address.
Yeah.
And where are they going? Which part of the house are they actually checking out? Where they're spending their time, right? Like, how do you do that?
So that's really, really easy these days. Just Google Analytics. So it's a
You're
free.
using Google Analytics?
Oh yeah, we live and breathe by Google Analytics. It's still the most accurate tool. Now there's other tools out there, but Google Analytics, if you're listening to this, well, it's it's provided by Google. It's just a bit of code you stick on your website, works in the background, and it literally tracks every single click. So sorry to tell you, in this day and age, you are tracked everywhere. And one of the main tools, Google, obviously, it's in Google's benefit to encourage everyone to use Google Analytics. So they've got this massive database of all clicks.
Yeah.
But as website owners, oh gosh, it's mind-blowing. We have a rule, Hannes, that you don't buy a website unless it's got Google Analytics on it, because you can't do due diligence otherwise. And so what Google Analytics lets us do is, on any website, I don't need to know anything about the niche at all or about the website. As long as I've got access to that Google Analytics, I can see everything. I can see how many people come in there. I can see what are the pages that they like spending time on. I can see how long they spend time on a page. And that is a really good measure of the quality of the content. So I've looked at tens of thousands of Google Analytics accounts, which sounds really geeky and whatever, but hey, this is what we live and breathe by. Over the last decade or so, I would literally look at Google Analytics every single day. And what I've noticed is, to give an example, is that when people come onto a website, if they bounce straight off, that's a bad thing. But if they hang out and read an article, there's this thing called average time on page. And typically on, let's call them not such in well-written content, it's under 30 seconds. And people are obviously bored. But if you see that people are spending more than a minute on a web page, especially once it gets up into 2 to 3 minutes, that's actually quite a long time. This is very rough benchmarking, right? It's just what I've observed over the years. But that's just kind of gives you one idea of how you can very quickly, you don't even have to be able to read English to realize, or English doesn't have to be your first language, to realize that if someone's reading an article for about 2 or 3 minutes, that's very high quality. They're engaged. And then Google goes way deeper than that though as well. That's just at the most basic level. So the reason I mention that is you can see already from that example just how powerful Google Analytics is for determining the value of a website. It is an incredibly powerful tool. Pretty much that would be the number one tool we use in our due diligence process when we're looking at a website.
So, but it only starts working after you put the code in, right? Like, so it's not that you put the code in and you gain any past traffic.
No,
it just starts the day.
And that's why we have a rule. If a website doesn't have Google Analytics, you don't buy it, because you can't do due diligence. Just move on to the next deal. Most webmasters on the planet would use Google Analytics. I know if you're new to this and you're just listening and you don't know the website well, you're probably thinking, wow. But seriously, it's pretty rare that I find a website that doesn't have Google Analytics on it.
We just moved our website to Kajabi.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure we don't have it built in there by default. No, I'm pretty sure we have to set that up.
Yeah, I'd get your webmaster to install the Google Analytics code onto. There will be other stats on Kajabi though that show you your visits, but I would still put Google Analytics on it.
Yeah, I've worked with Google Analytics in the past. We've used that on the actual food-related delivery business, and I'm not sure why it didn't struck me on this one. Like, I've never thought of the website as business savvy as you're doing it.
Yeah,
I looked at it more so as a storefront. For general information, less so as a business in itself.
That's what we love. That's what we love. That's what we're passionate about, teaching people. We've noticed that. It's funny, ever since we got online buying businesses, every business owner we meet says exactly what you say, Hannes. They go, oh, I just never viewed my website as an actual asset. And we're going, well, it's a huge asset, particularly in this day and age. And we love that, opening people's eyes to the idea that even little tiny microsites have value if you know where you're looking. And that's the really exciting thing. And most people don't see the opportunity right in front of them every single day. Now, you would be amazed. We have, even myself, we have a client that they bought a pet website. It's just about pets. And it's not particularly anything special looking. It was making $300,000 a year net when they bought it, and they fixed it up, and now it makes $600,000. So they bought it for $1 million. So you compare that to real estate. And he is a real estate investor. That's why I mention it on this podcast here. And he typically buys commercial real estate. So he bought this website for $1 million. It's making $300,000 a year. And he fixed it up by putting on better ad system, and he got it up to $600,000 a year. So that now values it, because websites sell on a 3 times multiple, that's 3 to 4. That values it over pretty much $2.5 million. Now that's a real asset, but here's what I want to mention, coming back to your point, people don't realize how valuable these websites are. He himself didn't realize how valuable they are, but I tell you, anyone that looked at that website would have no idea that it's worth $2.5 million and makes $600,000 a year. It's a very basic looking website, and it's just about pets. That's all it was.
This is where I think most of us real estate investors lose it, because for us, it's easy to size up a business that we see down the road.
Yep.
It's like, I can see the dimensions of the building.
Yep.
I can see probably in some public filing, I can find out how many units are in there. I can see whether it's a B or a C class, what kind of working class rents we're getting here. And I have a pretty decent understanding what's going on. But with a website, unless somebody gives me the access to the analytics, okay, I can probably go on SimilarWeb and size up the overall traffic of the website.
Yep. Or you can use SEMrush. Yeah. That's a really good point, though. See, this is what we do, though. We teach people. So people in our community who've learnt of us can see the value, though. So we had, if I go back to Nathan and Alexa, the young couple that bought the knitting site, one of their best buys was not an expensive site. It was, they were talking to a guy here, and so I'm from Australia. They were talking to a guy here in Australia about his website. It was a gardening site. And exactly what you said, most people didn't recognize it for what it was, but they saw the value in it because it was just neglected, but it was 14 years old, and they could see it was ranking well in Google. And so they just had a chat to him and said, hey, what are you doing with this website? They reached out to him because they're in Australia as well. They know nothing about gardening, but they could see the value in it because it was just neglected. And they bought that site for $400, and they've fixed it up. And talking of traffic, when it hits our spring, it now gets 80,000 people a month visiting that website, and it's making anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 a month. But no one else saw the value in that. So when it's like you said, real estate investors can, they can measure the dimensions, they can physically see things. It's exactly the same online when you know what you're doing. It's just a slightly different skill set. It's pretty easy to.
It's more of a mental exercise where you need to know the tools and where to look and how to put it together in your head.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly right. So it's just a new skill set, and that's what we teach. We teach beginners how to do this. So there's obviously people like myself and my wife and all my friends and everything. We're all really advanced. To us, it's easy to see the value in a website. Admittedly, you've got to spend a little bit of time, digging around. Like I'll see it sitting there, and then I'll do a bit of due diligence and use some of the tools like you mentioned. And that's even before we get access to Google Analytics. When we get serious about buying it, then we ask for access to Google Analytics. Yeah. But even before that, I can reverse engineer. If you know what you're doing, it's like you guys can reverse engineer the value of a property you see in a street. Like you said, you can go and look up the details. Well, we can do exactly the same thing with a website. Exactly the same concept, except we can sit at home and do it all on a laptop at night in our Jimmy Jams. Easy.
Yesterday a friend sent me, he wants to buy like a small multifamily property, like anything between 4 apartment to 10 apartment units. Awesome. And he sent me something. And I immediately like, this doesn't look rightly priced for where it is, the vintage it is. Yep. It's too old. It doesn't have the kind of air conditioning. And it took me like 45 seconds to give him that information. Oh. I'm like, you probably want to move on.
Yep.
And that's what I'm seeing with you. You're like, you take a look at him like, okay, those kind of metrics make sense. But the guy probably doesn't have analytics. Let's just pass.
Yep. And that we do it. It's exactly, you're right. It's exactly the same thing. I will admit, probably takes me a little bit longer than 45 seconds because we have to fire up the computer and just look at a few little things.
Yeah.
And normally, Hannes, you know what I'm normally looking at too is the niche. I'll just have a quick look on Google and I'll open up a bunch of sites. Like I'll Google the main, say it's the gardening site. I'll look up this particular site that Nathan Alexa bought was Native Australian Gardens here in Australia. And so literally I would, in that instance, if someone said, hey, can you have a quick look at this? I would probably just Google it and then look at 10 to 20 other websites in a niche, and then I'd have a pretty good idea. So that's typically my process. And once you know what you're doing, and then you fire up the tools.
But for example, when we speak about food, like the general food blogs where you have like literally a million food
there
blogs.
are millions of them.
Like what does it help you to look at 20 other food blogs?
Yep.
Like, how do you determine whether that one food blog, because there seem to be like a dime a dozen.
They are.
Like, if I think about making a food blog, I'm like, who am I competing with? There's like a million people out there doing it.
That's why it surprises me, because on food blogs, hopefully you listen. Well, it doesn't matter what niche you go into, but this is a fascinating niche. And so you want to know something
It's actually the same with real estate. So if you think about real estate podcasts, or like, for example, when it comes to multifamily real estate syndication, there's like probably, I don't know, thousands of people creating content around it because it's how they structure their lead magnet to eventually have investors in their pipeline.
Yep.
So in a similar way, I think it's very hard to have a domain that drives a lot of traffic that is valuable beyond kind of being the business card of your business.
Yeah, what you've got to be careful with online, what I see beginners making mistakes when they come new to this is the human mind cannot comprehend the vastness of the internet and the amount of traffic. So even I'm still surprised by microsites. Like, you can't even find them on Google, but they make thousands of dollars a month. It's funny how the internet works. The numbers are so huge. So why this is important is when you come to niches like food blogs, and it's funny, Hannes, for many years I told our clients, we have a lot of clients who are into food and cooking, and I always said, don't do food blogs. There's exactly what you just said. There's way too much competition. If I do a Google search, there's literally millions of food blogs out there. How are you going to compete? Anyway, I was saying that once at a live event, and one of the world's top brokers, we'd invited him to speak. He was speaking with me at this event. One of the world's top website brokers just said, Matt, he was like me, he's been online for many, many years. He said, one thing I'm going to pull you up on is what you just said. And because this was a virtual event, we had there's about 500 of us listening to him. I think it was like a boot camp or something we had him at. Actually, it was a couple of hundred of us listening. And he said, I'm going to correct you on that, because right now he flipped up his laptop. I've just sold in the last week a paleo blog for $5 million. I have 3 other food blogs for sale. They're all under offers, like they're the hottest things ever. And next thing you know, I'm saying, why? What's going on there? And he said, well, food blogs, if people stick to them for years, the aged ones become incredibly valuable. They do get big followings. And because the niche is so big, that was the first time, this was just after COVID, it really switched me onto this idea that, okay, even though it's massively competitive, it's my own advice that I tell beginners. The numbers are so big, it doesn't matter. And if they're successful, these food blogs, they're worth a fortune. So there's 2 ways to get into the food blog. And the reason I'm using the food blog example is it relates to any competitive niche. And this is what we teach. Often, if you want to short circuit the time that it takes to become successful in the food blog space, guess what the easiest thing to do is? Just buy one. And that's what people do. So there's 2 things you can do in a massively competitive niche. You can either build a website from scratch and it will take you years to do it, or you can just go out and pay the money and buy an existing successful food blog. And food blogs are very, very lucrative if they work well. They're passive in how they generate their revenues, because you just put on AdSense and it's all automated, handled by Google. You don't have to do a thing. All you've got to do is keep up the content. So the reason we don't recommend food blogs to beginners still is, and this is what I said to the broker, his name was Joe, I was saying, I still don't recommend them to brokers because they take quite a lot of work to run. you've got to regularly post content and stuff like that. And that's a lot of work if you're a beginner. But these food blogs, Hannah said the one that he was selling that he just sold for 5 million, he had, to give your listeners an idea, so that was making over $1 million a year. And the lady that owned it, she didn't write for it anymore. She had a team of about 5 writers, outsourced writers. And that's all there was to the site, and an editor and her. And she was like the public face of it, but she didn't write any of the articles. And she started it originally because she got all the recipes written and the stuff by experts just off Upwork. And so the team came with the sale. So that's how easy, that's how light. And so my background, right, is buying and selling bricks and mortar businesses. To me, when we discovered that you can run a multi-million-dollar business with just 5 staff members and they're outsourced, and sometimes you can run them with less writers than that. That's to make over $1 million a year, semi-passively. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on where those writers live, like let's say I have somebody who is extremely passionate about being vegan.
Yep.
And they're in India.
Yep.
And I might be able to hire them for like $10,000 full time for the whole year. And they are actually excited that they get to write about their passion all year long.
Yep. And
they're like, they're like, I can't believe somebody is giving me $1,000 a month so that I write over what I'm passionate about.
Yep.
And then even their mom will not believe that somebody else on the other end of the world gives them $1,000 to write about their silly diet.
Yeah.
Like just like.
And that's how it works in all the niches. And I guess that's the essence of the simplicity of these online businesses compared to bricks and mortar businesses. And that's why all those years ago when Liz and I, Liz being my wife, discovered this, that's why it just excited us so much, because for many years we'd been on this journey of trying to figure out what's the perfect business model. We hung out with a lot of very successful entrepreneurs who bought and sold bricks and mortar businesses, and we wanted that freedom to be able to work from home. And we just started a family. That's the other reason why we started online. And to be able to make money online, at home, working the hours we want and raise our young family, it was just perfect. And it was the business model is, okay, there's work involved, but it's very simple when you break it down compared to a traditional bricks and mortar business. And I think, like you said, I hope one of the big take-home points that your listeners got today, and it sounds like you've got it as well, is that there's way more value in a lot of websites that you see out there than you could ever even begin to imagine. People so often think they're just an online presence, but they don't realize there's massive asset value sitting there with these online businesses.
Incredible. This is so different from what we usually look at in terms of assets and real estate assets, and
I love it, Hannah. You're super smart, and I'm sure your listeners are the same. It's just you're asking really insightful questions, which has really got you thinking, and it's cool. The questions you've asked, when you think about it, are perfect. You've uncovered this idea, and this is how we were when we discovered this space. This is how everyone is. It's just mind blowing. Obviously, there's skills you need to learn. You need to learn digital skills. That's the bit. There is that knowledge hump. And that's basically the main risk we see for people getting into this space so we can open up their eyes and we can teach beginners how to do this and all that sort of stuff. But there is risk in this. You're buying online businesses, and it's mainly about knowledge, understanding. Like for yourself and your listeners, you guys can, value a property in a certain address, and because of your experience, well, that's what we do online, and that's what you've got to get to. You've got to be able to run through your head, do a bit of research and go, yeah, okay, that site is actually good. Or, when you see the numbers, you think, does that make sense that it really does make $1,000 a month? I'm not sure. And you do your due diligence. And that's basically the main thing, is learning those digital skills. The actual concept of how these websites work, it's easy. That's really simple.
I want to show you something. So here, this is it's not quite a friend. It's someone in the real estate space who bought a recruiting company, and he just spent $400,000 on this domain, somewhere.com.
Yep.
So the company used to be supportshepherd.com before.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And he bought somewhere.com for $400,000. Actually, that's him down here. And then I'm always wondering, like, is it actually worth it to buy a .com that costs like $400,000? He didn't buy the business. This is just a domain. The business himself cost himself a lot more money.
Okay.
That's just a domain, the 400,000.
Yep. With a short, so domaining, that's called domaining. That's not my area of expertise because it is a real art.
Okay.
But gut feel, like I do know about it. We do a little bit of it. It's not something we teach because it's all, values in the eye of the beholder when it comes to a domain name. Now, short domains and names like somewhere.com would be incredibly valuable in this day and age. The way I would value that is speak to a domain broker. We have friends that do it at that multi-million-dollar level, and it's really interesting talking to them. They make big money out of it, but it's another art. So we Liz and I have always just stuck to what we know, which is buying and selling businesses that have a P&L that make money. They make money each month. A domain name is kind of like a fine red wine. It sellers, and hopefully someone pays you a lot more money for it later on down the track. But those rare domain names like words, like somewhere.com, I do know they are incredibly valuable. And there's a whole marketplace for that sort of a thing, but we don't teach it.
So, but in terms of the traffic that you actually get, like for example, I own the domain privatechef.cc, not .com.
Okay. Dot what?
CC.
Oh, yeah, okay. .cc, yep.
So in my mind, that's privatechef.culinary.community.
Oh, gotcha.
But
yeah,
obviously SEO,
Yep.
SEO or something looks at that very different. And obviously because it's CC, which is actually, I think it's the ending of some Caribbean island, if I look it up.
Yep.
Like that's what it actually is. So I don't know how that affects SEO. Maybe it's like maybe it wasn't smart at all, and I should have just spent. I think it was $1,200 to get the privatechef.com or something.
Yeah. Have you got the .com?
No, I didn't buy it. It was
the .com is always more valuable. It's definitely more valuable, and Google does look more favorably at .coms because it's traditional. So you think even on an iPhone, the shortcuts, there's a .com shortcut, and because it is the standard. So that's another really good question. If there's not a lot of value in the domain name as such, the value can actually be sitting in the SEO, which is the traffic that's coming to that domain. If it's aged,
that's my question.
Yeah, so that is hugely valuable. And we actually look at that. There's times when we've said to clients and even ourselves, I don't care what the domain name is. This website's getting, 2,000 visitors a month in a really nice niche. Well, then that's worth a lot of money. So if it's getting traffic, at the end of the day, that's the measurement of the real value, in my opinion, as opposed to domaining, which is kind of based on, how rare is it. I like the idea of I see privatechef.net. Oh, look at the price of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, see, straight away I went to that, privatechef.net. That's worth a lot of money. Privatechef.agency. Yeah, all the other stuff is,
I don't know, .co.
.co's not too bad. How much is that's private chefs though?
Oh, yeah, private chefs, yeah.
See, what you can do is, if you can't get privatechef.com cheap, I'll just give you a little tip.
Well, that needs to be brokered or someone already owns it.
Yeah, but you could just register myprivatechef.com or put a prefix in front of it, something like that. Often that's enough. So rather than spending thousands of dollars, so if you're listening to this and you can't get the domain name.
You're still at $10,000.
Oh, that's even more. Okay, this is a really popular, there's something really good around it. See, this is an interesting niche. So there's a lot of money. This is highly valuable. You could put the letter I in front of it instead of my. You could try that. I Private Chef, $22.
1 cent. You can buy it right now.
Yeah. Or privatechefadvice.com. How to become a privatechef.com. See how that's descriptive? What about privatechefsecrets.com?
But this is way too long, no? How to become.
Yeah, that's too long and it doesn't look right. So I'm just throwing out ideas though. So what we do is though, our process is brainstorming and we just throw out all these ideas and we see what floats. I like the idea of privatechefsecrets.com if that's what you're teaching.
Somebody already got that one.
Yeah, because it's valuable. It's very valuable. But see how what I do is we throw out all different. There's always a way. We teach it to our kids. We have a saying here in our family and in our community, there's always a way. And that's one thing we've learned about being online. There's always a way to, figure things out. You don't need a lot. The good thing when you're getting on with online businesses, as opposed to bricks and mortar businesses, you can growth hack it. I'm sure your listeners have heard this idea. You don't need, if you're smart, you don't need lots and lots of money. And that's why we love the online space, because the small guys can still take on the big guys. No matter what niche it is, once you know what you're doing, and again, it's knowledge. It's all about knowledge, knowing how to do these things. There's always a way to growth hack your way into any industry, even the biggest competitive niches on the planet, like food blogs, cars, finance, health, all those sorts of things. There's always a way, when you know what you're doing, to growth hack it if you don't have a lot of money to get going.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very, very interesting, Matt. Well, where can people connect with you and learn more about how to do this? Like how to actually invest in websites,
Well, they can come to our main business site, which is called the eBusiness Institute. So it's not the best, talking about domain names, a long domain name, ebusinessinstitute.com.au, or you can just Google my name, Matt Rada, and you'll find your way to it as well. And we've got, the usual thing. We've got a free masterclass on there, but there's also some really good interviews with some of our really successful students as well. And, if you want to start learning about this, I'd suggest you listen to those and do our free masterclass.
Yeah, I love it. This is such a different real estate we've spoken about. So I'm glad we got some time to speak about that, because see, it's also once we start looking at the world in a certain way, which doesn't always serve us. Like yesterday I was reading over LinkedIn, there was a broker who described how Walgreens moved location into small. And I was thinking, wow, he sees the world through broker lens, because this is what he sees, and then he's wondering why.
Yep.
And in that way, you just taught us that there is a different asset class that we can look at. It's not just buildings with walls and stuff that are also valuable in itself.
Well, Hannes, I love it. I'm glad I got you thinking quite differently, and your listeners. And I've got to say, awesome questions. I think that was thought-provoking for all of us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So ebusinessinstitute.com.au, and we will add all of that in the show notes too.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much, Hannes.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.